Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are going to be looking at what's happened the last couple days with the Carolina Hurricanes, and we're going to be taking a look at what does their offseason look like. So, the Carolina Hurricanes season ended in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs to the New York Rangers. So now that we are kind of coming past that, they just did their locker clean out press conferences, interviews. We have more clarification who's going to be the next head coach for the next 5 years. That might be a little bit of a spoiler, but we're going to talk about all of that here today. So let's start off with the man himself, because I think Rod Brind'Amour is, when you think of the Carolina Hurricanes, you think of Rod Brind'Amour, you think of him creating the culture that's been there since he came in, I think 2018, 2019. And the Carolina Hurricanes, even though they have not won a Stanley Cup as him behind the bench, he has been a huge part of the turnaround of this hockey team, the culture, and just everything surrounding the Carolina Hurricanes. So he's locked in for the next 5 years. We don't know the details of the deal yet. They're still trying to negotiate that part right now. But really what this comes down to was Brind'Amour wanted to make sure his assistant coaches got their extensions first. And we see this in all types of sports. And that's why I kind of waited to make this video, is because I wanted to make sure, specifically for the Hurricanes, that we got more clarity on Brind'Amour, because in everything we're going to talk about here today, it all starts with this. So the fact that they got that done, like I said, the details of the Brind'Amour deal will come out at some point, but it's another 5 years, and all his assistants are coming back next season. So that's a good start for the Hurricanes, right? Well, they do have a couple of pending UFAs and RFAs that we need to talk about. It's going to be an interesting offseason for this team. So when we take a look at some of the players that are currently on the roster right now, that could be on either the move or could be getting extended, some of the bigger names for the Hurricanes right now, the first one being Evgeny Kuznetsov. He's on a 1-year deal. I think he enjoyed his time in Carolina, but to be honest, I just don't see them having enough room to fit Kuznetsov to come back for next season. Unless he takes a significant pay cut, he's making 3.9 right now. He might even have to take less than that, because there are just so many guys that are going to be getting raises for the Carolina Hurricanes this summer. I just don't see a scenario right now where Kuznetsov fits that mold. Jesper Fast, his deal ends this summer as well. I expect him to be off of the team as well. Brendan Lemieux has 1 more year left on his deal. So these are all conversations, and excuse me, I apologize. These are all going to be UFAs next year. That's my apology, guys. So all their UFAs for this summer, okay? So UFAs, guys that could walk out the door, no restrictions on their deal, are Jake Guentzel, Jordan Martinook, Stefan Noesen, and Teuvo Teravainen. So it's all going to come down to how does the money work out. Because ideally, I think they would keep Jake Guentzel, Jordan Martinook, Stefan Noesen. And I hate to even say that they're going to let Teuvo go, but when you have a guy like Jake Guentzel, you have the ability to turn him down. Because I would say Guentzel would be an upgrade over Teuvo Teravainen, and the reality is you're not going to have the money for both of them. Now, he did have a 50-point season this year, so that's a tough guy to say goodbye to, but if you think Guentzel could be as good as we think he is, then we're probably looking at a situation where a guy like Teravainen goes out the door. Now, again, it could come down to the opposite, where, it sounds great to keep Guentzel, but if he really is set on making $8.5 to $9 million per season for an 8-year deal, Carolina's not going to really have that money to give that out. So if that's the case, well, then they'd rather keep Teuvo making 50 points a season, making $5 million a year or $6 million a year. So that's kind of the balance that the Hurricanes are going to have to figure out. If they have the money and the cap space to get a Guentzel deal done, we're going to see them keep Guentzel. If not, it's going to be the opposite. It'll be probably Teuvo. Stefan Noesen and Martinook, those are more glue guys for the Hurricanes. They remind me a lot of with the Islanders, with guys like Cizikas and Clutterbuck and Martin. Those are your tough guys in your bottom six that really make the team a little bit chippy and a little bit gritty. So if I'm Carolina, I'm finding any way possible to keep those guys around. They're good playoff performers. They played well in this year's playoffs. I would think that the Carolina Hurricanes will want to keep those guys around. Looking at some of their RFAs, this is a little interesting. So you got Ryan Suzuki, Marty Necas, Seth Jarvis, Jack Drury, and Maxime Comtois. So considering the fact Ryan Suzuki really didn't play much for the Carolina Hurricanes, I don't think they're prioritizing him here. He doesn't even have arbitration rights, so that should make the decision easier in terms of if they keep him. He doesn't really have much say here, but he spent last season with the Springfield Thunderbirds, and he picked up 30 points in 51 games. I could see this honestly being a guy they just let walk and let him find his own path somewhere. It's a shame what happened to Suzuki here, but I just don't think it's going to work out in Carolina. And like I said, maybe a change of scenery is what he needs there. Looking at the other guys, RFA, Seth Jarvis also doesn't have arbitration rights. Now, what's interesting with Jarvis' situation, he is going to be a much different animal than Suzuki. He is going to get a pretty good raise here. I think Carolina is going to try and do some bridge deals with these guys to keep them on shorter term deals with less money. And then when, let's say, Jarvis turns 25, 26 years old, just stretching his way into his prime, that's where he's going to make the money. And that way for Carolina, this keeps their window open for another 3 or 4 years if they're able to sign these guys on short-term, lesser dollar amount contracts. But he's still going to cost a lot because he had his most productive season this year. He had 67 points in 81 games this season. And not to mention in the playoff run this year, he had 9 points in those 11 games, 5 goals during those 2 series against the Islanders and the Rangers. So when you're looking at the situation with Seth Jarvis, this is a guy that is going to be expensive no matter how you look at it. Even on a 3 or 4 year deal, this is a guy that's already at 22 years old producing 70 points a season. So let's see how that goes, but that should be pretty interesting to see what kind of deal he comes out with. Jack Drury is probably going to get a lower number, but he is still going to be, I think, a part of the Hurricanes. I think the Hurricanes are going to try and keep the kid from Illinois, Winnetka, Illinois. This is the type of player that, for the Carolina Hurricanes, he adds depth down the middle. And that's really this is the type of player that, with Kuznetsov maybe not coming back next year, this is the guy you really want to prioritize keeping because he can fill out that bottom 6 or even that middle 6 as a center. He did have 30 points last season in 74 games, so he didn't play the full season, but he still picked up 30. He still picked up 30 points. He also was he was half a point per game during the playoffs. He picked up 5 points in 11 games. He only got 1 goal during that run, but still, he's picking up points. He's producing, and I think that's only a good thing for him going into this summer. Who else is here? Maxime Comtois. Really, it's a shame what happened with Comtois. I think he's just going to walk, and he might be going back to Europe. I don't really know what's going to happen with him, but, unfortunately with the Hurricanes, there's just too many good hockey players, and maybe he went to the wrong place, but I think they were hoping to see more from him when he came down to Carolina last year. Things just haven't worked out for Comtois. He's probably going to walk. And they'll probably, he has arbitration rights and is under restriction. I think Carolina, maybe similar to Ryan Suzuki and Comtois, they're just going to say, listen, guys, we understand your situation. Let's just do the mutual beneficial thing for both of us and just part ways. And I think that's kind of what we're going to see there with Comtois. And of course, the biggest one being Marty Necas. Now, Marty Necas is going to be a tough one because the situation around Necas is this is a guy that I don't really think we've even seen his full potential. And Peter Mrazek said it as much the other day. He kind of said, he's like, the Hurricanes are not really showing what he's fully capable of. And, he's kind of talking about their World Juniors, right, or the World Championship run that they're on right now. And there is more to Marty Necas than we see. And part of the reason we're not seeing that is because they know the dollar amount every time he picks up a goal is going to go up. But with that said, in 77 games, he had 53 points. During the playoffs, he had 4 goals, 9 points during those 11 games during their run in the postseason this year. So Marty Necas is going to be, like I said, that's what makes this summer tough for the Hurricanes. They're going to have to make some tough decisions because you have Seth Jarvis, you have Marty Necas as RFAs, and then you have Jake Guentzel, and then you have the guys on the back end, which we're going to get to in a minute. Just looking at those 3 guys right off the bat, Guentzel, Necas, and Jarvis, those 3 guys, they're not going to come cheap. So Carolina's got to make sure they have the money allotted for those players, because this is a situation where you're going to have to move some guys maybe just to create the cap room for your guys to re-sign. I don't know what Carolina is going to do here, but this is definitely not an easy situation. So now we're going to look, moving things down, looking at the defense and the blue line. So pretty much half your defense is up for new contracts this year. So looking at the guys that are an RFA, we only have one. That's Dylan Coghlan. I don't even know. Again, this is another guy that, he looked like he had a lot of potential, but man, that trade didn't work out for Carolina, did it? It really didn't. Between Suzuki and Coghlan, he did play well for the Thunderbirds last year. He had 40 points in 60 games. It's difficult, right? Like sitting here today talking about Dylan Coghlan, I wouldn't be surprised if they just kept him and he was just an extra defenseman. And I just don't know if there's too much more behind that, which is a shame. But you know what? When you have guys like Ron and Sealy and Scott Morrow coming up the pipeline, is there really room for Dylan Coghlan moving forward? I don't know. Looking at the UFAs, this is going to be a tough one. This is going to be a tough summer for the Hurricanes blue line. Brady Skjei, Brett Pesce, Tony DeAngelo, and Jalen Chatfield. All four of those guys are up for new deals this summer. I think they're okay with letting Tony D go. I think there's definitely, he's one of those guys that it was a good project to try, but I don't know. I'm not totally sold on where Carolina is with DeAngelo, because even in the Ranger series in particular, there were so many times I remember watching him, and it just seems like he just completely misses his defensive assignments to almost look like a forward. And I just don't think that's going to work in the playoffs. And the thing is, it's like he's taking these big risks on the blue line and he's not really producing. He didn't score a goal during the playoffs. He played in 9 games. He played in 31 games during the regular season. Like, I think Tony D is going to be somewhere else. I can't tell you where. I just don't see where Carolina's thinking, like, yeah, we need to prioritize keeping this guy. I just don't see it. Jalen Chatfield, I think they would like to keep him around. But again, this might be a situation where Chatfield ends up being one of those guys that ends up leaving the team because they see guys like Scott Morrow coming up. And it's not that you want to let him go. It's more so the money. Like, there's only so much money around. Can they afford to keep Jalen Chatfield? I unfortunately, I'm not totally sure they will have the money to do that. And like I said, with guys coming up, maybe that's less of a priority. Brady Skjei, at 30 years old, I would like to see them keep Brady Skjei. Again, this is where the tough decisions come in, right? Because I think, in all honesty, I think DeAngelo and Pesce go, and Chatfield and Skjei should be coming back. But I don't necessarily know how the money's going to get allocated. But with that said, if I had to be a betting man today, if I had to pick who was going to stay, who was going to go, Chatfield and Skjei, they're going to stay. And then Pesce and DeAngelo are going to be shown the door this summer. Right? That's my prediction. I really can't tell you. It's based off of gut feeling, the way the money looks right now. Their situation is difficult, right? Because if Carolina goes and makes a trade for another defenseman, well, then it makes it clear definitely who else is leaving. Again, there's too much that can happen between now and the draft. So we'll see. Goaltending is going to stay the same. We got Anderson, Kochetkov, and Spencer Martin. All three of those guys will be returning for the 2024-25 season. So that's an easy one. Looking at some of their other players in terms of younger players, we already talked about on the blue line, guys like Scott Morrow. Other guys on the blue line, Charles Alexis Lejar, Anthony Honka, Alexi Hemosalmi is another younger player. They do have the rights to Ty Smith, Dominic Fensore, Joel Nystrom. I totally butchered those names. I apologize for that. But up front, Juha Jaska, Gleb Trikozov, and Noel Gunler. So there's a couple of different players there. Justin Robida. And in between the pipes, nothing really crazy, but Ruslan Kazayev. Antti Ranta is a UFA this summer. He's probably gone. And Yaniv Peretz. So there's a couple of interesting prospects for the Carolina Hurricanes between goaltending, their forward group, and their defense. In terms of what I think Carolina is going to be next year, I know, like I said, I mean, if they lose all of Gensel, Natchez, Jarvis, if they lose everybody, then it's a totally different story. But I think they're going to be able to keep the guys they want. Like I said, because Brendan Moore's coming back, I think that gives a lot more clarity to the guys that want contract extensions. So you might be asking yourself, Kevin, why didn't they sign these guys sooner? I think in all honesty, I think there's two reasons. One, I think the players want to believe that there is a capable Cup champion here. They want to play on a team that's going to win, and I think they've seen through what's happened with the Hurricanes here over the last couple of years, Brendan Moore returning. I think that's enough for a lot of these guys to say, yeah, I like what's happening here. I want to stay here, and I want to be a part of the solution to fixing the Carolina Hurricanes playoff drought since, 2004, something like that. So yeah, in terms of what I think of the Hurricanes for next season, I think they're going to be right where they were this season. This is a team that is a good regular season team. They stumbled out of the gate. They struggled early on in the season, but they didn't let that hold them back. And again, a lot of that comes back to the veteran leadership from guys like Stahl and Burns and Brendan Moore behind the bench. There's enough glue and enough of a core and a strong, stable stronghold to this team. Now, even when they faced adversity early in the season, I think that's the difference between them and a team like New Jersey. The Devils really struggled early on this season. And they kind of had the opposite, where they just fell off and they never really got back into it. That wasn't the case for the Hurricanes. They stuck to their guns, they knew what they had to do, and they just found ways to win. And I think that's that veteran leadership really being put on display for them. With that said, I mean, nobody cares. They're like, hey, listen, Kevin, it's great. This is a great regular season team. What are they going to do in the playoffs? It's way too far away to even consider what Carolina could do in the playoffs next year. The expectation is always going to be that this is a Stanley Cup contender, and this is a team that can compete for the Cup. Going into the playoffs, they had the best odds to win the Stanley Cup. They lost in the second round of the playoffs again. So it's just one of those things where you need it. I think it's a glaring example of some teams just have good teams, like really good teams. But the problem is, come playoff time, you not only have to be a great team, you need everything firing on all cylinders, and you cannot have any deficiencies. And for the Carolina Hurricanes, it's not even that they really had deficiencies. It's more so like I hate to say it, Freddie Anderson got out-dueled by Shesterkin. And I think that is the kind of thing where when you get deep in the playoffs, you need a goalie to be super hot in the playoffs. And Carolina is a team that's known for running with both goalies during a given playoff run. So let's say game 1 and 2 don't go your way. Well, the leash is very short and Kochetkov comes in. And then if that doesn't go well, you go back. Like there's the stability in between the pipes, I think, is the biggest criticism I would give for the Hurricanes. They have a bunch of great goalies by committee. That sounds great on paper, but when you get to the playoffs, you need one. You need one goalie that just gets hot at the right time and is able to lead you down that path to a Stanley Cup championship. Because we don't see a ton of times where you have the 2-goalie system team winning the Stanley Cup. It just doesn't work normally. And I think that is part of the issue with the Hurricanes. And I'd love to know what Hurricanes and other fans think of the Hurricanes, because I think their situation is very different than a lot of other teams. The way they play is a little bit different, and they're built for the playoffs. And I think that's what's frustrating, is this team is built for playoff success. But to be honest with you, I think a team like the Rangers, and I said it in the preview of that series, I just honestly think that Carolina is just not a good matchup against them. And as much as, as I'm an Islander fan, I can tell you, when I heard the Islanders were playing the Hurricanes, I knew, this is going to suck. Because the Islanders, since Brendan Moore came in, they do what the Islanders do, but better. And they're just a terrible matchup for the Islanders. And it's the literal opposite for that with the Rangers. And I don't know what it is, but Anderson is scared of a team with a blue jersey on that says Rangers. I don't know what it is with that. But those are the type of things that they can't happen in the playoffs. And you have to go through teams like the Rangers to win a Stanley Cup. right? So, I don't know. I'd love to know what you guys think down below. This is a bit of a longer video, but hopefully it was informative. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, got some good information out of it. And like I said, it's going to be an interesting summer in Carolina, so stay tuned. Hopefully we'll get some more clarity going into the draft, what's going to happen with Marty Necas, Seth Jarvis, Gensel, even on the back end, some of those guys like Pesce and Chatfield and Shea. So I'd love to know what you guys think. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you again next time. Peace out, guys.